What are you building?
Italy is a country, GDP is a metric. How do you place that in a database? How does that look like?
When you're pitching investors, don't even try the things you tried with me.
I think there's something that no one has realized.
There's something hyper-specific, relevant, and painful here. I think you need to be unhinged. What I've been looking for is what you just validated, which is like, how is this really going to be different than all these other products? Embrace the parts of this that might feel uncomfortable. Awesome, with a round of applause. Founder number 4.
Thank you.
What's your name?
My name is Marta.
Marta, you're going to have a minute to pitch your business and get some feedback. Are you ready?
Yes, of course.
Awesome. What are you building?
So, sales reps spend 3 to 6 hours a day navigating their CRM. They've only got 2 hours left a day to talk to customers. So, we built a system that helps them maximize that time and understand what they need to close those deals, right? So what our technology does is it captures information from their calls with customers, from their conversations with customers, and uses that information to help them perform tasks, such as it syncs with their CRM and it reports all of that directly into their HubSpot, their Salesforce. It helps them draft follow-up emails. It helps them know what deals they should prioritize based on which ones are hotter and what questions they should ask to move them forward. And it's available for anyone. Any rep can sign up it's 100% plug and play. You can log in through tinghq.com.
That's a minute.
tinghq.com.
Well done. Let's start with, kind of the first objection that comes to my head is probably the one that you get the most often. A lot of people are building in this space.
Yes.
They're building in the space not only directly, as in they're building products for sales reps, they're building full-on AI CRM tools, they're building for the CRO, they're building the SDR to AE pipeline. There's a lot of folks playing in this space. Let me ask it in a broad way. How do you think about you existing in this very, very currently tar-pity environment of AI SDR or AI sales products?
I really love this question because I think there's something that no one has realized. And what they haven't realized is, what they have realized is that, yes, AI has a huge potential to automate. But what they haven't realized is that reps absolutely hate their CRMs, right? Like there's a really big problem with the current stack. And the reason for that problem is that historically, all of the sales tech has been built for managers, right? Like all of the stack that sales team use has been decided by the managers, and thus it's being built for them, right? Like they are the ones deciding what should be on it. And that's a problem, right? Because it's the reps using it. And in the end, they are using something that no one asked them if they liked or not. So that's what we realized from the very beginning. And that's what we're doing different to everyone else. We're not building for the managers, but for the rep.
What does that look like? And so give me a sense of the product differential.
We're not doing B2B sales directly. We're doing a PLG motion. So our go-to-market is directly to the rep. We are using influencer marketing, content marketing to get to the reps. The system is 100% plug and play. So you don't need any integration with Salesforce or HubSpot to use it. Our system recognizes the fields automatically and fills them up without your manager having to approve. And that way our reps are able to use it. And then we obviously upsell to the company, right? But that way we are making our product very viral because they can use it in 3 seconds. They can sign up and use it, and they can also tell their peers. Right now we have a 43% referral rate. So, the virality is working. They love the product, and the way we're going to grow this company is by upselling them and upselling to the company.
There's a reason I really like this answer that I want to put to the side for a second. I'll come back to it. But before I do, let me push on a little bit of the places where I still want more. What does that mean in terms of the product differential? So I get the idea that you're going direct to these individuals, and so they're getting to use something plug and play. Yeah. It's not bought by the company, so they can use it immediately. What else is different, though, about the product itself? Because I could imagine that being true and the product still not being that different from what HubSpot and, let's say, Salesforce will begin to offer them as they roll out their own AI products. Does the fact that you're targeting these reps directly also mean that there's a difference in functionality?
Yes, I mean the main difference in functionality is that they are the ones that define how the product is, right? Like it's not. So what HubSpot is offering is a way for them to. HubSpot doesn't have anything similar right now, but if they were to offer anything similar, the front. So would always be HubSpot, right? Like the problem with legacy CRMs is that they will always have the structure of legacy CRMs, right? Like it will always be structured and seen.
Let me push you a little bit because there's something that's interesting to me. If I, as a sales rep, am deciding how, what's the product called again?
Ting AI.
Ting AI. If I'm deciding how it looks or feels, how might I make a different decision than the top-down driven served by HubSpot or Salesforce AI product? Are there ways in which a sales rep might actually build a different workflow for themselves that you can use as examples versus what might be driven by, kind of the top-down product?
So the question is whether they can use both or not?
No. Is there an example that could be, the question is, I'm seeking an example. Is there an example of how the sales rep driven version of this looks very different?
Yes, it looks very different.
But sorry, when I say looks, I don't just mean looks, like functionally acts different.
Yeah, I know. I see your point. I mean, I see your question. I see your point. It's functionally, I'm guessing that all CRMs will try to do similar things. I'm guessing they will. Actually, I'm guessing they will acquire companies like mine to do these kind of things, right? Because what they're not able to do right now is record. They don't have they're not focusing on recording, no? They're focusing on organizing and everything else, no? We are focusing more on recording and on capturing information, right? So we're starting from completely different points, right? But what is very different is the feel, is the UX UI. Is that we are not building a UX UI for the manager to watch. All CRMs are made for the manager to see, right? So if you enter a CRM, you sort by deal, you open up the deal, and there's a bunch of fields. You have different charts that inform you about different things about the customers, no? So all of that is made for the manager. What for us is completely different. The look and feel of the platform is completely made for the peace of mind of the rep. And what it's really imitating is the note. What we realized is that all reps are using a notebook separate, to keep track of their deals. They're using a notebook and they write down specific stuff, and that's when we realized the system is broken, right? They're being asked to use this system that is supposed to help them, but they're keeping their own record, right? So what our UX UI is more trying to imitate what's natural for the rep.
So there's a lot about this pitch that I don't like, but I think it's because it's hiding something that I really like. I'm not sure if what it's hiding is true though. So I'm going to talk about what I don't like. I'm going to talk about what I do like.
Perfect.
And then tell me if this is true. And if it is, I will give you a way to reveal it.
Thank you.
Everything that I don't like has to do with how you talk about what other people are doing, because I think they will be good at it. And I think it will be useful. In other words, when you say they're not doing meeting recording, I think some of them are and other products are. So I don't know that you doing meeting recording and focusing on the sales rep is interesting. Doing stuff outside of the CRM, I think some products are trying to do, both coming out of these CRMs themselves. They realize that people don't like their interfaces, but there are people building on top. Again, all of the stuff where you're directly addressing my objection, because I've said there's lots of these products and there's lots of CRMs, and you reacted by saying, yes, but we're going to be better in these certain ways. All of those things fell a little short for me. But throughout, you kept hinting at something that, again, I don't know how true it is, which is that it's sales rep driven. And this could either be in small ways or large ways. If it's in large ways, I think this is a really interesting product with a really interesting potential to wedge its way in ways that other products can't. What I mean to say is, if a sales rep gets to utilize their own understanding of their flow, differentiated from you deciding or a Salesforce or a HubSpot deciding. In other words, because as soon as you said you're going direct to them without needing the B2B sale, this is when I started to get excited. Because what you're saying is, we want to be useful to you. Not your boss, not you at this company as the company decides, but you as an individual professional.
Exactly.
And who needs that right now is individual professionals, because people are underperforming, they're getting fired, they're getting laid off, it's hard for them to find jobs. And so there is an individualized desire that's not being met to basically be somebody's co-pilot in their work.
Yes.
But most co-pilots are sold to a company.
Yeah.
And so to your meta point, these co-pilots are going to be good for the company. They're going to drive the way the company wants to drive. They're going to reduce headcount because they're going to enable senior people, but not junior people. They're going to help the organization be more effective, but through the lens of the organization and how they decide to deliver the co-pilot. Versus if you go to a sales rep and say, hey, you want to do better.
Yeah.
And you have workflows that you might understand better than your boss, whatever. And the inputs will still go to your company, right?
Yeah.
The sale will still happen and your company still gets the sale. But you have needs where we're going to let you drive a little bit more of what this looks and acts like. That's super fascinating.
Yeah.
My question to you is, am I right that that's true, right? Because the other version of this could be you saying, what's the company called again? Sorry.
Ting AI.
Ting AI decides what sales reps needs and we're deciding it bottoms up. That, is fine because it's you saying we care more about sales reps. I like the version where the sales rep is driving the product.
Well, not only it's true, but let me give you a specific example, right? So indeed, like what part of our product is a Copilot, right? So not only it gives you stuff, but you can also interact with it, right? So an example of something that would happen in Ting is information. You can chat with the Copilot, but the Copilot will always help the rep achieve their most important goal, right? What they really look for most, which is hit their quota. Like that's what the rep cares about most, right? And everything we build, like everything that the Copilot gives you proactively, you can also chat with it, but everything that gives you proactively is to help you reach your quota. And what this means is help you understand how you can close more deals, either how you can prioritize better, how you can ask questions that you haven't asked, etc. Right? This is what happens on Ting. What do I think will happen on a Copilot on a CRM? I think the conversation is different. For example, the conversation is how it's more like you're not going to solve it. So the Copilot will not be as much focused on helping the reps close, but the managers make decisions of what resources they need to hit that quota, right? So whereas on Ting, it will be more of a qualitative approach, right? Of helping the rep, because there's only one rep, right? So the Ting will always be focusing more on qualitative stuff, on helping that one rep hit that one quota. On the CRM, it will always continue to be more quantitative, right? Help the manager know what resources they need to hit that quota.
So I think you need to be unhinged in your pitch, and maybe even your product. So I'll give the investor feedback, but I think also founder, I think embrace the parts of this that might feel uncomfortable. In other words, what I've been looking for is what you just validated, which is like, how is this really going to be different than all these other products? And again, you gave me enough nuggets that now we're having the great conversation. So I'm glad it's happening, where you should literally say, look, 1,000 SDR AI products are being built. 1,000 AI CRM products are being built. But think about the experience of being an SDR using one of those products. You're going to go in and it's going to give you the recommendations that your VP of sales said are the right behaviors to take. It's going to talk about your accounts in a certain way because it wants you to use the right language. But the modern worker, especially Gen Z, who's fulfilling these SDR roles, they're unhinged.
Yeah.
They only think and they want to talk in terms of their quota, how much money they're going to take home at the end of the week, how annoyed they are at one of their accounts. And what we're building is an unlocked, unfiltered version of an AI SDR Copilot, where unlike all these other more formal products that are bought by these big companies that are controlled by sales managers and VPs, ours is controlled by the rep. And so if you want the thing to rap at you, it'll rap at you. If you want the thing every morning to remind you how much you're making, look, the official thing that Salesforce provides might let you talk about your quota to it a little bit, but it's not going to talk directly about your quota because if you work at American Express, it wants you to think more about the goals you have for the quarter, the company's mission. But you want it to tell you, here's how much I need to buy that fancy car that I want to buy. And we enable this more personalized version. And that's a fun example, right? Then you go into, and then it decides to ask about your workflow, and it knows that you use Notes instead of Obsidian or whatever. And you get into the workflow parts of it too. But I want you to embrace everything that's different and don't even compete. Don't even pitch to, have you raised money yet?
No.
When you're pitching investors, don't even try the things you tried with me. and I know why you tried them. I'm not knocking you for it. It's the right thing
Yeah.
to do. But only play in your sharp edge.
Yeah,
These other areas, other people are going to beat you on, right?
Yeah.
A Salesforce or HubSpot or a company that's going to sell to big companies that has an enterprise go-to-market motion, they're going to build a highly integrated version of this that's going to be really good at meeting notes and going to be really good at blah. But your version, the advantage is my go-to-market's different. I'm selling to the rep. The rep can buy first. And when the rep can buy, they're my customer first. I eventually want to sell to companies in a Slack-like bottoms-up go-to-market motion. But today, the rep buys it, which means they control it. They control how it interacts with their browser, how it interacts with their CRM. It controls how it talks, what it talks about. It can even include stuff about their personal life. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just giving you an example. Embrace everything about that because that's what an investor will invest in.
No,
you might convince somebody else to say, oh, this is another bet, AI SDR, but I think you're much more likely to convince a lot of people on this very opinionated version of a pitch.
No, I love it because you skipped like what everyone knows, no, and went directly to what's different.
Exactly.
So that's a good advice. Thank you.
Super interesting. Thanks for sharing. Good luck with it. It's super interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
I love where we got with that pitch. As I mentioned earlier, CEO for agency, we coach job seekers. And I think it's like the most repetitive thing I say to people is you will not win at someone else's game. So if you are an old, I'm going to use the word old today because I feel spicy. Old candidates, old clients of ours, literally old people, more senior experienced individuals, will refuse to put their graduation year on their resume. They go, they're going to see you when you hop on Zoom. Like they're going to see you, just put it on there. You're the more experienced person. Win the job at the company that wants the more experienced person. You're not going to show up and suddenly be the Gen Z employee, right? Are you applying for the right job? Okay, then you should be the right fit. Okay, and what is unique about your experience? Find the story, find your analogies, find the things about your past, and be good at talking about them. Because it's not that you don't have something else to bring to the table. You might be old, but that means you have something to bring to the table. And so your objective as a job seeker is to be really good about communicating that sharp edge, that advantage that you have. Then it's up to the company to decide whether they want it, right? They might still say, no, we do want this other thing and you're not the right fit. But that's okay. That's a good reason to lose. Same thing is true in foundership. There are good reasons and bad reasons to lose. If I decide I don't like a sales rep-driven product because I don't believe that'll scale from a sales perspective and I need something that's only going to sell into a VP of sales or whatever it might be, okay, fair enough. I'm not going to invest in your startup because I don't like the go-to-market motion. But that's a good reason for us to disagree, right? It's embracing what's unique about your startup and saying, who wants to bet on this unique thing, on the sharp edge that I'm bringing to the table? You're far more likely to find people who are excited about that than you are to convince them about the other stuff that everyone else is also talking about. So, job seekers too, embrace that that sharp edge. Shall I welcome next founder up? Round of applause. I like the hairstyle.
Doppelganger.
What's your name?
Guillermo Moleno.
Guillermo, you're going to have a minute here to tell us what you're building, get some feedback. You ready?
Awesome, yeah.
What are you building?
So my name is Guillermo. I'm the founder of Avanz, a AI tool for financial data analysis. After spending about a decade working at Bloomberg and the financial data industry in general, I realized that a lot of my friends still use Python in order to transform financial data, or they have to leverage someone internally who uses Python, who has knowledge of Python. So think of things beyond more simple than finding PE ratio or comparing prices between two stocks. Think of, for example, a correlation heat map of asset classes compared to Bitcoin. So Avanz does exactly that. Simple workflow where first you ask a question and then you receive a chart and then you can iterate on that chart until you have a final output. Then users can pay to download that chart without a watermark or download the resultant data or upload their own data. Businesses can then incorporate Avanz within their tech stack or data sources such as AWS, S3, Databricks, and obviously use the AI agents that's powering Avanz for things much beyond chart visualization.
Under a minute, good job. I think I get it from a straightforward what the value prop is. Let me ask the obvious question of, cannibalism by the foundational models. This sounds like stuff like the foundational models will be able to do, or let's say a Perplexity that can access real-time information might be able to do. Obviously, if you had access to proprietary information, that might be part of your answer. But let me ask this question broadly. In the landscape of AI products that are going to be good at data ingestion, visualization, pipelining, how do you differentiate?
Yeah, so I think for the incumbents in the data space, it's basically a cartel, S&P, FactSet, Bloomberg. All of them are going to try to have users use their data. So there's that. So that means for the ones that are not part of the cartel, basically is having as much incorporation of third-party data sets, publicly available data sets, and proprietary data sets meshed together. And examples, for example, if a user wanted to create their own risk factor model, there's MSCI that does that. But at the same time, you want to incorporate, let's say, your own proprietary data, publicly available data meshed together. This is where something like Avanz works.
How would someone try to do that today?
Honestly, have someone who has access to Python, who can code this, who would have a data science team that processes the data. Likely,
and what's the vendor you just said the name of that start with an M?
The MSCI.
So I'm not that familiar with the space. So they're selling what data about?
Risk ESG data. They're most known for ESG. But
So and if I'm buying their ESG data, am I receiving that as dashboards or an API or as data raw?
Usually as raw data via SFTP or an API.
And I can access that at any point?
Yes. And
okay, so then my data engineer is going to decide on what cadence are we pulling that data? Am I building a real-time dashboard or whatever else it might be? What do I need out of it? We're going to have a conversation, and then I might get a solution out of that.
Correct.
What am I typically, I know this is going to differ depending on use case. Am I a publisher that's doing market reports? Am I a bank that's doing internal white papers and analysis? Am I a bank that's doing actual investment decision making? What are the core behaviors your customers are taking?
So for Avanz, we want to focus on small, medium asset managers. So think of RIAs, private family offices, small asset managers. Since usually the incumbents, like the big banks, the big asset managers, they would use something like MSCI. And as you can imagine, MSCI now has, just using them as an example, have all-inclusive products, software, dashboards, risk models, the whole 9 yards to make sure that you stay using their data. This is more for someone who doesn't have a budget for something like that.
And this and Bloomberg and all these other products are what? How much a year?
$200, $300, $400, $500,000 a year.
So everything we just talked about from a story perspective needs to be stuffed into your pitch. Because as you were talking about it, I was thinking, okay, how important is this, right? And I think the back and forth that we had, I kind of guessed that this is where we would wind up, so that's why I asked it. But other people won't be so kind as to ask all these questions. They'll just give up when they think, oh, is this really that valuable? It's you world building. And saying what you need to understand is there are a bunch of these firms that can't afford, and most people know about Bloomberg terminals costing a lot of money, but don't really know about even what Bloomberg is useful for. Is the truth about most individuals, including venture investors. Just so you are aware, they're far less cognizant of the financial world than you'd expect. And so you're saying these firms exist. They want access to this data because it allows them to make choices, allows them to understand either how to move their money or assets or their customers' money or assets. But there's this class of products they can't access. And so today, they're mostly using manual solutions or buying one-off or accessing public information. And so what we're building is, now here's where I have more questions, so I can't yet complete. So are you building a workflow thing, your own data, marketplace, a combination? Talk a little bit more about what specific advantages you're plugging in.
So my previous experience at Bloomberg, at the very end, I was a product manager for one of their reference data products, specifically corporate actions. Basically, during that process, I realized that every data set basically wants to be the source of truth for that asset manager. Our North Star at Avanz is creating a relative source of truth or like a personalized source of truth for that user. If they want to use specifically Bloomberg data, fine. If you want to use Bloomberg S&P FactSet data, fine. Usually what ends up happening is that they want to create a mishmash of different data sets, typically because data providers have strengths in certain asset classes over others, bonds, stocks, etc. So this allows them the opportunity to leverage the AI agents within their business in order to create their own source of truth. So basically the LLMs are trained on whatever they're working on. At the moment, it's mainly Snowflake. And from there, then any new data sets that you introduce that either you want to build AI models on top of or a new ETL process or something as simple as charts, then they can do so.
So they're already warehousing the data in this case?
Correct.
Okay, that's something that wasn't clear to me until just now, and I think is key, essentially, because at some point I was going, are you also, kind of brokering this data?
No.
So you are simply no, you're not a workflow tool. You're not a developer tool either. You're like what do you call yourself?
It's funny because I've gone with workflow automation.
Okay. I guess the reason I hesitate is because it sounds like the alternative will require an engineer. So I'm like, it's more than workflow automation for that reason. But I get what you're like right there.
The coolest term I like using is stealing Palantir's financial ontology tool or terminology, because I know a lot of AIP is around just understanding what are all the different data sources you have.
Yeah.
And the reason I like beginning with charts is that it's very easy for people to understand.
I wonder
charts.
though if it's easy that it gets people on the wrong track. Because again, my head immediately was like, great, it's another chatbot where I can get charts out of, right? Then you began to world build a little bit. I was like, okay, no, it's not that. But so, because a lot of founders have also come on the stage with products not exactly like yours, but adjacent, and they always start with charts. And it always means, even like the other week, there was an academic researcher that started with charts, and it's like, now I need to get really specific to find out, okay, what's important about this, because charts by themselves and by their nature are not important. It's like some objective that an organization, your ICP, is trying to solve. Okay, so, and then from a product perspective, so you're sitting in their data pipeline.
Correct, yeah.
And then your end user though, so there's an engineering team integration, and then the end user is still...
So the end user, at the moment, we're targeting like macro researchers, macro hedge funds, economists, that sort of thing.
But who at those firms?
Typically, either anyone who's creating a research report or any end user who currently just needs charts.
I guess maybe this is an education piece for me. Are those people, when you say they need a research report, is it an individual who wants to generate a research report because they're handing it to their boss, or are they also the person who's using the research report?
Generate the research report either to hand it over to the boss, or it is the end product of the business itself. Like I think of World Bank or IMF, in which they create
white papers.
White papers. If inflation rates go up, this is how equity indices in like Japan get affected. That sort of thing.
Okay, and so, but I guess I still let me phrase my question differently. Is it the person who's reasoning who's also going to be in the tool asking for all the synthesis, or is it a person who's more concerned with the activity of looking at data? In other words, do they have an analyst and they're telling the analyst, I need this report, then the person looks at the report and uses it? Or is that professional going to be the one to use the product as well?
So in an ideal world, it's that professional, since typically the analyst is the one that knows Python and is currently transforming the data. Right. Typically, the way we do a sales pitch is that we begin with speaking to the macro researcher, and almost always it's interesting starting with charts, because they're like, okay, so there's just charts. What if I want to implement my own data? Well, if you want to implement your own data, then now we're talking about ETL, data engineering, et cetera. So that's why we have that entire side for enterprises. But for the common user, if you were to go to Avanz right now, you would think it's just charts. And then eventually, once you go down the weeds, once you have sales calls, you realize that it's really just AI agents powering it on the back end.
And this is just curiosity, and then I'll bring us home. But from a AI perspective, is this mostly complicated because of the generation of data or the analysis of data?
It could be a bit of both. I think the complexity comes from there isn't a unified data model for things that go beyond equities. So like for the average human, they understand like a stock is traded on an exchange. Therefore, there's a way that you can easily, with using row and columns, understand like what a stock is. Now, if you think of GDP of Italy, Italy is a country, GDP is a metric. How do you place that in a database? How does that look like? How do you compare that to like another country or another metric? So that typically tends to be the harder part, and where like LLMs can be very useful, just understanding like what that scale is.
And relative comparison. I think you need to get to all this. My intuition, definitely for investors, much earlier in that minute or that initial meeting or in that pitch deck. And my hypothesis, but you know more about the space than I do, but my hypothesis is it's also useful on your landing page and initial marketing, so that people don't think of you as a simple product. Because, again, we've built to this place where like I guessed some of this was going to exist, when you initially pitched, but I think a lot of investors won't care to like think that far with you. So you're going to like go, do I know about this? Do I understand why this is valuable? Do I understand how much money exists in this place? Versus once you describe, this is data they're already warehousing. They might even want to buy more data, but they don't have the capacity to actually ingest it today and actually make it usable. If they could make it usable, it'd be good for their bottom line. Here's all the reasons why. And so our product is sitting as both an orchestration of that data, and then also getting to some fundamentals as to normalization of data, relative comparison, doing some of the work of an analyst. These parts of an analyst are important. Here's the parts we're taking away. Because all of that is A, hard, B, does require agentic or multi-step kind of chain of thought style AI product in the back end. C is technical. in a deep and fundamental way where charts doesn't really get at it, right? Because these products are starting to, GPT or OpenAI today released more of Canvas that can run Python right next to ChatGPT. So I think those things feel like easy. Some of those chart style things feel easy, but this other stuff you're talking about, especially if you reach someone who understands this space, they're going to go, oh, there's a real moat here. And so if they either already understand your customer or you get them to world build to appropriately describe your customer, then they're going to go, well, that stuff's for simple use cases. There's something, hyper specific, relevant, and painful here that, what's the name of the company again? Avanz is addressing. So find your way to world build a little bit more in that pitch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
So for venture-backed companies that want to compete with large enterprises and maybe like find their wedge, do you have an opinion as an investor starting, with SMBs, starting with the micro hedge fund versus competing with the likes of Bloomberg? So
different investors have different opinions on this, and I think it is 50-50, where half of them have the hypothesis that actually SMBs are a healthy place to also live. And they think business models built on top of SMB use cases are not only interesting in the beginning as a wedge, but also can be really interesting in the long term. And then half, I think, have soured on SMBs. And they soured on it because the past 5-6 years, SMB contracts are the ones that went away the quickest when the economy shrunk a little bit. SMBs were the quickest to say, we don't need as many SaaS tools. We're going to, kind of shrink our headcount. And so we don't need as many seats for the SaaS tools we're going to keep. And so there, again, half, I think, of venture capital has become pessimistic on SMBs. So then it depends on what's true for you as a founder, right? Is like, are you building something where you do think SMBs not only will like your product, but are the long term of your product? Then you got to find investors who are down for that journey. And it's a good thing to be, kind of holistically aligned with them from the beginning, because if you're not, they're not going to like a lot of what you're building, because if you're building SMB, it's a lot more self-service, or it's a lot more low-cost seating, and you're going to be trying to drive your cost of servicing down, versus if you're enterprise, you're going to be more okay with heavy integration, cost and timing. You might build a lot of ops. You might build an entire professional services division one day. People don't realize this, but a lot of enterprise SaaS companies that are public and have grown to scale make most of their money in services, not in selling their product. And so, I think it depends on the investor. And then your job as a founder is to say, okay, am I open to both, or do I have one picked? And therefore, let me wrap myself and be honest, so that you have an investor who's going to back your experiments and your go-to-market in the direction you actually want. I have many founder friends who maybe weren't as clear about that, even though they knew in their head what they wanted to build. And then the relationship with their investor disconnects over time, because that investor, again, believed in a different go-to-market, a different pathway. The headcount of the team was going to look completely different. And sometimes it's a pivot that's reasonable and everyone agrees on, but sometimes it's actually like an accidental disconnect in philosophy, and that's what you don't want. So 50-50, and then as a founder, good to be honest about what you want to try. And you can also display to an investor, hey, I'm open to both. We don't know yet. We have to do our first few design partners, launch an MVP, all that stuff. Yeah. All right, so welcome the next founder up. Round of applause. What's your name?
Albert.
Albert, so you're going to have a minute to tell us what you're building and get some feedback. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. What are you building?
We're building.